Well, welcome to our unique series of CEO one-on-one interviews that we launched here at G2E in 2022 with the effervescent and always enthusiastic Dermot Smurfit, CEO of GAN. And before we begin, Dermot, one of the things I want to make sure folks understand is that this series of interviews is sponsored by IGT, and we appreciate their financial support to make this possible. Dermot, it has been a very busy year for gaming companies and for GAN. Externally, there's been a lot of issues to deal with, whether it's the evolution of COVID or the concerns about recession and inflation. And on the internal side, you've just simply had an awful lot of things that you've been doing. Can you give us a brief update on GAN in this past year and where you hope to go from here?
Well, let me help frame that for everybody who's watching in the audience. The reality is GAN has simply been focused on execution, okay? We've been controlling what we can control and executing extremely well as a business. And by way of reminder, in summer 2020, shortly after we went public on NASDAQ, we were given a shareholder mandate to go out there and see if we could find a better sports technology solution to bring here to the United States. It's exactly what we did. We closed on an acquisition of CoolBet in January of 2021, and then skipped forward to literally 3 weeks ago, we finally deployed. So we went from acquisition strategy, building out a retail solution capability for an online sports-only company. That's relatively complex, but they hit the ball out of the park with a market-leading retail experience. And we just brought it live here in the US on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi with the fine people who operate Island View Casino. So it's extraordinary to get from strategy to execution to reality, and that's where we are today. And it's been an incredibly busy year. We've had a lot of macro headwinds. I think there's a lot of companies with international businesses on the FX scene. You've had some micro challenges with supply logistics, but fundamentally, we're in a great position as a company and positioned for growth in the future. And I couldn't be more excited today to sit here with you. I think this is literally the sixth CEO one-on-one interview that we've had together. And compared to where we started 6 years ago, Frank, we had one small piece of the entire industrial B2B jigsaw puzzle that we needed for America. We now have every single piece, whether it's the PAM, iGaming aggregation, iGaming content, online sports, retail sports capability, certified, deployed, and operating here in the United States. I couldn't be more proud of where we got to versus where we were when we first started talking to each other back in 2015.
There's no question that your company has grown a lot from a very small company to one that I think you, kiddingly, before we began here today, said is now an adolescent. What's in the future for the next year or two as you grow into full adulthood?
Great question. So as with all adolescents, there's a lot of tricky behavior, and we always identify, one of the more complex aspects of our business today, which you can easily break out into, 1/3 revenues B2B, 1/3 international iGaming, 1/3 international sports gambling. The 1/3 of sports betting, that's almost the trickiest part. That's the most irregular behavior of any adolescent company. So we are getting far better at figuring out how to understand that business and crucially forecast that business, and that's been a challenge year to date. And it's, if I can, I'll express a degree of contrition. I don't think our forecasting was as good as it should have been or could have been, and we are learning as we go through the year. But this year is really characterized as a year of transition, as we transition to positive adjusted EBITDA and positive cash flow as an organization. So where we are today, going through into Q4, we're incredibly well positioned for 2023 and beyond. And that's the consistent messaging we've been offering to the marketplace. So short term, sports gambling hold and margin are always in the side of things that we need to be better controlling and forecasting, but all the other aspects of the business are in fantastic shape, whether it's our B2B client sales pipeline, bringing our retail online sports capability and other capabilities to the market, or really stabilizing our cost structure, optimizing our cost structure, and keeping steady state. And we're at what I call cruising speed as an organization with more than 700 people worldwide, and we don't foresee any significant expansion in that capability going forwards.
As I mentioned earlier, you've got a lot of components. You've got a B2B business now. You've always had a B2B business. You've got a B2C business now. Can you just itemize the major components for folks who aren't as familiar with GAN?
Sure. Okay, so if you look at the core strategy of GAN and the mission statement, it's like Star Trek 5-year away mission to planet America. Actually, it's turned out to be an 11 years and counting mission where we came here to solve the problems typically faced by retail casinos when they're presented with the opportunity to move online. So we are now a one-stop shop solution provider for whatever you need if you're a retail casino. The platform, also known as the PAM, battle tested, been live, built, scaled hugely at Super Bowl levels since 2013. We've got the iGaming aggregation piece, so we aggregate, I believe, amongst the most online casino games that are operating online here in the most mature state, being New Jersey. We're present as an iGaming B2B tech provider in every one of the iGaming states, major iGaming states. And we, of course, have added, through the acquisition of CoolBet, the capability to launch retail and online sports betting, all plugged into the central platform or capable of being plugged into other third-party platforms if, in certain instances, people are operating in-house, proprietary, or alternative third-party PAMs. So we have everything that we need, and the crucial point about being a one-stop shop solution provider, every single piece of the jigsaw puzzle I've just articulated has to be not just average, has to be good, great, or exceptional. And with GAN Sports, which we're showing now in operational version, it is an exceptional product offering, and we're incredibly excited not just to showcase it for the second G2E running, but showcase it as here, this is hard and real and operational in the United States. We have a very, very healthy sales pipeline and very, very exciting demand from casino executives for the GAN Sports capability.
And one of the things that you've mentioned in the past is that this is your technology, and you own it, you develop it, you continue to enhance it, and that is a competitive advantage over other vendors that companies might go to that do not have their own destiny in their own hands, as it were.
Correct, yeah, and it's as a capitalist, it's very hard for me to use the term socialism, but we have socialized the cost for retail casino operators in bringing their internet gambling business live, whether it's retail or online. All of our clients over many, many years are all contributing to the very significant cost base required to build this very complex technology. I think a lot of people misjudge the amount of complexity, and for what it's worth, with a relatively recent conversation with some very well-educated senior casino executive owners here in the US industry, they said very clearly, we are not and will never be a software developer company, and that's why we want to engage with you guys, because we know not only do we underestimate the vast amount of time, energy, and money to develop what we have today, but whatever GAN has today, even if we spent 10 years and hundreds of millions of dollars to get to that same point, GAN will be 10 years further downwind. So that's just the hard reality. I think there's a lot of bordering on naivety when it comes to the assumption that technology is easy to develop, deploy. It's really about the operational readiness of technology, not just its capability.
And you know, in another context, we've already been there. It was some years ago, a number of the casino companies who were irritated by revenue share, the participation leases, and those kinds of things started to experiment in developing their own slot games, and they soon found out that they're casino companies, not games.
Yep, and casino management systems. So occasionally you come across what I call hybrid casino management systems, where they bought a copy of a code and they built on top and around it, and that usually doesn't last. You know, that's not something that's a proven method of operationally executing and maintaining what I call competitive parity with what else is going on out there. Our technology solution and the end user consumer experience, particularly for retail and online sports betting, we believe has leapfrogged what's been extant and operating here since the launch of sports gambling outside of Nevada in August of 2018. So we're super proud to showcase what we have today.
One of the phenomena that we saw in the US in recent years was the great excitation among investors over the proliferation of sports betting and online gaming. And stocks of companies shot sky high.
Yep.
And then when the reality settled in on many investors that the day of profitability was a while off, they collapsed. And GAN has not been immune from that phenomenon. And you mentioned being cash flow positive this year. What is the outlook, if that's the right word, for GAN stock, and what is the investment premise today? And I guess finally is the third sort of part of that, is what do you say to those investors who bought your stock a lot higher?
Well, I'll deal with that last part first. So as a joint investor, I mean, I am a co-investor, and I bought the vast majority of my shareholding over the past few years. So I am an investor alongside every other investor, whether they're retail or institutional investors. So the key message, and I say this to myself every morning when I wake up, is focus on the execution. We have been through the hype cycle of investor unrealistic expectations. I would hope that we're somewhere towards the trough of disillusionment, and over the next few years, we will be on the steady slope of enlightenment. What the levels we have been as a sector will return, really the question is a sense of timing. We all know the opportunity is very significant. Profitability is a concern across the group. We, GAN, trade within that group, so we're subject to the vagaries of investor sentiment, not on our individual business, but the group as a whole. So we will, to an extent, our stock price has to show, and I hope we'll be one of the very first demonstrators of the ability for the sector to become very significantly profitable over the course of 2023. So I'm a big believer in what we're doing. It's a huge opportunity, much bigger in many ways than you and I talked about back in 2015, courtesy of the repeal of the sports betting ban and the way sports betting feeds into iGaming. So I think what has come to pass will come to pass again. And that's the reality of investment cycles, I'm afraid.
Right. We're at G2E. What are the products or services that people absolutely must see this year when they visit the GAN booth?
Come and take a look at our GAN Sports retail kiosks and OTC devices. I mean, it's unusual for a technology company to be getting excited about showcasing physical devices, but we have a fantastic user interface, really exciting ability to drive consumer adoption and creation of multi-game parlays, multi-leg parlays, which are critical for profitability in the retail space and the online space. It's the brainchild of a very smart team in Estonia. We're incredibly proud to showcase it, and that is what I describe as our hottest of hot products that we've ever had in the B2B industry here in the United States. So if you want to come and touch and feel the GAN difference, it's available at our booth.
Okay, great. That's been a good overview. Anything else you would like folks to know about GAN?
I think a little bit of perspective, which I know you and I talk about on a semi-frequent basis. The perspective of the industry is it started as a very small kernel in 2014. It was literally $100 million in online gambling revenues from iGaming only, really coming out of New Jersey. Today, the scope and the expansion of regulation enabling principally retail sports betting in 32 states, online sports betting in 22 states, and iGaming in truth in only 4 states. And yet, you've got the sports gambling opportunity of $8 billion, and then iGaming revenues this year about $4 billion. That's still an extraordinary acceleration of value, and profitability it's coming. And I think there's going to be a sharp intake of breath as people see the industry pivot to profitability as we move through 23 and 24, in line with all the publicly traded CEO comments on the profitability inflection point. So I think we're going to see a very interesting evolution of the market. But I sit back with a perspective of 20 years paddling what has become a very substantial ship in GAN, and I now know that the medium to long-term future for everybody here in the United States is really rather exciting.
I think if you go back and you look at the .com bubble and its bursting, there are 2 things that are significant to me. One is that if you were there with Amazon or Facebook, you did really well wading through that time. The other is that a lot of the companies that went bust at that time never had a product, whereas the difference is the sports betting and online gaming companies today have products.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, and I think you've touched on the most appropriate investor analog. I mean, I'm just about old enough to remember the .com bubble burst as a what I call a consenting adult, and it does have some eerie parallels. But we're incredibly confident in GAN's prospects to navigate through the next few years and become, as a mature industry player, a long-term provider of everything that retail casinos need to address the opportunity both online and in retail.
Well, you're still a young guy because I'm old enough, you know, when people talk about Paul Volcker, I'm still old enough to remember that. Dermot, thank you very much.
A pleasure as always.
Enlightening.
Great to see you, Frank. Thank you.